She was the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the largest and most heavily armed battleship the world had ever seen. At over 70,000 tons fully loaded, Yamato was a floating fortress. Her 18.1-inch guns were the biggest ever mounted on a warship. Her armor could withstand direct hits from most enemy shells. And for a time, she symbolized Japan's naval supremacy across the Pacific. But by 1945, the tides of war had turned. The Japanese fleet was shattered. The empire was retreating. And Yamato, this behemoth of steel, had become a relic in a new kind of war. One where air power ruled the seas, and battleships were little more than targets. Still, when American forces closed in on Okinawa, the Japanese High Command made a desperate decision. Operation Tengo. It was simple, and suicidal. Yamato would lead a last-ditch assault to defend Okinawa. She was to beach herself on the island, becoming a stationary gun platform until destroyed. She would not have air cover. She would not have fuel to return. And her escort fleet was minimal. This was a one-way mission. On the morning of April 6, 1945, Yamato left port for the final time. She carried over 3,000 men aboard, most of whom knew they would never come home. To them, this wasn't just a battle. It was a sacrifice. And waiting over the horizon, was a storm of fire they couldn't possibly survive. The Americans weren't surprised by Yamato's mission. Through radio intercepts and aerial reconnaissance, the U.S. Navy already knew a fleet was heading south, and they were ready. Stationed around Okinawa were dozens of American warships, cruisers, and most critically, aircraft carriers. From those decks launched the weapon Yamato was never designed to fight, waves of carrier-based planes, each armed with torpedoes and armor-piercing bombs. They didn't send a few squadrons. They sent over 400 aircraft. It was the largest concentrated air attack ever launched against a single battleship. At 12:32 p.m. on April 7, radar contacts were confirmed. The first wave had arrived. Overhead, Grumman Avengers and Helldivers dropped from the clouds. The sea around Yamato erupted in white plumes, the telltale splash of torpedoes entering the water. Yamato's anti-aircraft guns roared to life. Dozens of AAA batteries lit up the sky with explosions and black smoke. Gunners fired blindly into the clouds, desperately trying to swat down the enemy before they reached striking distance. But there were too many. The attackers came in low, fast, and coordinated. Torpedoes raced beneath the surface toward Yamato's port side. Bombs crashed down from above, slamming into her armored decks. Explosions rocked the ship, fire and seawater surged over her metal skin, and crewmen scrambled to contain the damage. Within minutes, Yamato was bleeding from multiple wounds. She was powerful. But she wasn't invincible. And the sky just kept coming. As the first wave peeled away, the sea around Yamato boiled with oil, fire, and shattered steel. But there was no pause. No chance to recover. Within minutes, the second wave descended, even more coordinated, even more lethal. American torpedo bombers and dive bombers came in from multiple directions, aiming to overwhelm Yamato's defenses. This time, they didn't just hit her port side, they struck both flanks. Torpedoes slammed into the starboard hull, opening massive gashes beneath the waterline. The shock of the explosions lifted sections of the ship clean out of the sea. Internal compartments flooded instantly. Hundreds of men below decks never had a chance. Bombs rained down with terrifying precision. One struck the base of the forward superstructure, igniting fuel stores. Another punched through her armor and detonated inside a turret, killing the entire gun crew in a single instant. Yamato began to list, slowly at first, then sharply to port. Her pumps couldn't keep up. Her anti-aircraft fire began to falter. One by one, her gunners fell silent, their stations destroyed or abandoned. The deck became a battlefield of fire and twisted metal. The ship's crew fought on, refusing to abandon their posts. Damage control teams ran through corridors waist-deep in seawater, trying to seal breaches and jettison weight. But the scale of destruction was simply too much. By 1:30 p.m., the Yamato was crippled. She was taking on thousands of tons of water. Fires burned out of control. Most of her main guns were silent. And yet, she was still afloat. Still defiant. Still a symbol of a navy that refused to die quietly. But the third wave was already on its way. At 2 p.m., the sky roared once more. The final wave of aircraft tore through the smoke and clouds, diving directly at Yamato's broken silhouette. The American pilots had one goal: finish her. Yamato was already crippled. Her list had worsened to over 30 degrees, making it impossible to operate many of her guns. Fires raged from bow to stern. Her forward turrets were silent. Ammunition had either detonated or been jettisoned. The ship was bleeding from more than a dozen torpedo hits. Then came the final strikes, 4 torpedoes in rapid succession, slamming into her port side. One tore through the hull beneath the engine rooms. Another struck near the magazines. She groaned under the impact, her massive frame twisting under pressure no ship could endure. Inside, compartments collapsed. Power flickered and died. Steel bulkheads folded inward from the force of the blasts. At 2:20 p.m., Yamato could no longer fight buoyancy. She began to capsize. Men scrambled across the deck as it tilted steeply to port, clinging to rails, slipping into oil-slick water. Explosions burst from below decks as fires reached fuel tanks and oxygen lines. Then, the unthinkable. As Yamato rolled nearly upside down, a final, massive detonation ripped through her underside. Her main magazine exploded. The blast shattered the ship from within. A fireball surged hundreds of feet into the air, followed by a mushroom cloud of smoke, steel, and flame. Debris rained into the sea. The shockwave tore through nearby escort ships. And just like that, the most powerful battleship ever built was gone. She sank beneath the waves in less than 2 minutes. Of the over 3,000 men aboard, fewer than 300 survived. The sea closed over Yamato like a curtain. And in an instant, over 3,000 lives were erased. For hours, smoke drifted across the water. Oil slicks stretched for miles. Wreckage floated silently, twisted steel, lifeboats, and the scattered remains of a ship once called Unsinkable. Only 276 men survived. Some were rescued by destroyers in the aftermath. Others clung to floating debris in freezing water. Many were burned, deafened, or wounded by the shockwave of the final explosion. Those who lived were sworn to silence. The Japanese Navy didn't want the truth of Yamato's destruction reaching the public. Operation Tengo had failed. Okinawa would fall. The war would end in less than 5 months. And Yamato, once the pride of an empire, had become a steel grave on the seafloor, her mission forgotten, her sacrifice buried. For decades, no one saw her again. The wreck remained undiscovered. Lost in the depths, far from land, lying silently in pitch-black cold. A war grave untouched by light, currents, or memory. Until 2015. A team from Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's research vessel located the wreck. At a depth of over 1,000 feet, they found her broken hull, massive, rusted, but still unmistakably Yamato. The bow was shattered. Gun turrets lay twisted and lifeless. Her forward tower, once a towering command post, leaned sideways into the sand. There was no glory. No movement. Just silence. The kind only the ocean knows how to keep. Today, the wreck of Yamato still rests on the seafloor, a cold steel tomb, untouched for nearly 70 years. No flags. No plaque. Just silence. Her remains lie in two main pieces, the bow destroyed, the stern partially intact. Covered in rust, surrounded by silt, and wrapped in darkness. Divers do not visit. Currents do not stir her. Yamato is a war grave now. A reminder not of glory, but of loss. The battleship once symbolized the height of Japan's military ambition. Strength, resilience, power. But in the end, she became something else. A monument to the limits of that power. And the thousands of lives sacrificed in its name. She was sent to die. And she did, with honor, yes. But also in fire. In chaos. In silence. The men aboard her knew they would never return. Yet they went anyway. Not for victory. Not for survival. But because it was their duty. And now, beneath 1,000 feet of water, they remain. Their ship shattered. Their voices silent. But their story, not forgotten. Because this is Deep Sea Warzone. Where we tell the stories that sank, and the truths that still wait below. Subscribe for more sunken warships, lost legends, and voices buried beneath the sea. Some wrecks lie at the bottom of the ocean. Others lie in history.